I don't really have anything to share, but thank you for the invite. Uh, the Strive program is something near and dear to me. I was lucky enough to start the program back in the 1996-97 school year, back when I was president of Rotary, uh, and it has been successful since then, though certainly a challenge in the COVID year, as everybody on the phone, everyone can relate to. STRIVE, the acronym stands for Students Taking Renewed Interest in the Value of Education. Very simply, it's a scholarship, incentive, and mentoring program. It's open to the students at Ludington High School who through their junior year have grade point average below 2 point. It's voluntary. Both they and their parents have to agree. And once they agree to be part of the program, they're paired up with a mentor. Most of the mentors are Rotarians, but not necessarily. To make sure that we have mentors that we can trust, we're careful to vet them. The mentors meet with the students either in person or text or nowadays Zoom and what have you, but at least once a week throughout the school year. More often if they're able. The program has had a couple hundred students that have gone through since it began. While our numbers in the last couple years have been 7 to 10 students that sign up, we've been as high as 15. And so it's been in that 10 students a year average. We have had students, we look at their GPA through their junior year compared to their senior year. And we've had improvements as much as 150%. I think most years we average pretty close to 100% improvement. This year, our leading student is somewhere in the 90% improved. And this year, being probably the most challenging year that we've had with Strive, we're looking at 3 students that have successfully completed. All 3 students have 100% attendance, which given a COVID year, I think that's just incredibly impressive. But it speaks to the kids. We have over the years talked to both mentors and students. We've talked to students years after they got out of the program and became successful in their communities. And, there's really no one component that makes the program successful. I would say that, for some kids, many of these kids have a really tough home life. And so for some of them, it's an adult that cares. In some cases, it's the incentive. In some cases, as those of you as educators understand that, some kids, the light bulb comes on in their senior year and they finally decide to dig in. So, it's any combination thereof. But for the most part, I would say the mentoring part, having an adult that is interested, is consistent, is non-judgmental, listens, is a huge part of the success of the program. It is focused on what we call 3C's, or it's 3A, excuse me, academics, attendance, and attitude. They have to achieve a C average in their senior year. They have to have at least 92% attendance, and they have to have a positive attitude. And the fourth that we look at is they participate in the program, they talk to their mentor, they get engaged in other programs. So a little bit about the incentives. Each of the first 2 trimesters, we give incentives. We give $25 bonus for 92% at school attendance or above, $25 for 2-point GPA or above their senior year, and $25 for positive participation. If they do all 3, then they get another $25 bonus. If they have perfect attendance, they get a $50 bonus. And if they have a 4-point in that trimester, they get a $50 bonus. So they get as much as $200 at a trimester. We use, because Ludington area schools are on trimester, we use the first 2 trimesters for both the incentives, as well as we use that for the figuring the improvement. The scholarships that we award are based on improvement from the junior year through their GPA through their junior year and their senior year. And so the first most approved gets a $1,500 scholarship, second gets a $1,000 scholarship, third $750, fourth $500, and the highest GPA gets another $500 scholarship. And the requirement for those is they need to be involved in some Rotary activities during the summer, at least 2, whether it's our highway cleanup or planting petunias or making elephant ears. This year is going to have to be, we're going to have to adapt, obviously. And in addition, anyone that successfully completes, whether or not they get the scholarship, we do a $1.50 an hour match up to $720 for any summer employment from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So they have to keep track of their paychecks. They turn them in to me, and then we pay them at the end of the year a bonus based on their summer employment. So they get $1.50 extra an hour. So I talked about, the mentoring part and the incentives as the positive part of it, but both I ran the program for 3 years, and then Linda O'Brien ran it for 19 years in between. And so just started running it again this year. And I would say we went out to Rotary clubs in surrounding areas, actually, for as much as an hour away, talking to them about the STRIVE program, helping them try to begin a STRIVE program. And I would say few were successful. And the biggest part of that, Jason, is really the staff at Ludington area schools, the commitment of Ludington area schools. That makes or breaks a STRIVE program. You have a bunch of business people that have good intentions but aren't educators, and if the school is not 200% behind the program, it doesn't work. And that's not only just the administration, but that's the faculty. I know the first year or 2, as we were working with Ludington area schools, we had to spend a lot of extra time working with the teachers and the administration to get everybody on board, because you know, you've got a group of students that by their senior year, human nature, you know, the staff, the students, everyone's sort of given up on that block of students. And so, and on top of it, they haven't really developed the skills to be successful in school. So, you know, it took a bit to get everybody on board, but really the success of the program sold itself. So, but kudos to Ludington area schools. Without them and their involvement and their support, this program would never have lasted as long as it did or has or been as successful. So with that, questions?
Stan, I want to say thank you for the work that the Rotary Club in partnering with Ludington area schools has done to make the program highly successful. So when you start hearing numbers where you're seeing 100% turnaround in these students, you're seeing students that have not missed a day of school and are 100% in school attendance, it's pretty impressive. And so I just, as a student success committee here of the Promise, maybe want to push our thinking as a Promise zone and how we might be able to implement similar types of processes within the Promise zone to help us be successful. And I would say that, you know, certainly it takes the school and the Rotary Club partnering together to make this thing work. But I think importantly, we can't discount the relationship that exists between the mentor and the student. And just having had some involvement in my short time here in Ludington, watching the program and attending a few of the banquets prior to COVID, the relationship that existed between that mentor and those students were lifelong relationships that I'm quite certain many of those students still connect with their mentors to this day. And so that relationship piece is really critical in all of this as well, I would say. So just wanting us to push our thinking a little bit as a student success committee and how we may be able to implement similar measures to help ensure that Promise Zone students are successful, similar to the manner in which this program is operated for high school students. So it's not a question as much as a statement to the committee to say there are some significant relationships here to the work that we're doing as a student success committee to how this program has been successful. So thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Dan, is this a program sponsored by Rotary International? Is it a?
Well, it's recognized as a program in Rotary International. It's not funded by Rotary International or the foundation. It's self-funded within each club that runs it. And I would say fewer than 50% of the clubs have a STRIDE program. It takes a lot of work. So, you know, you've got to have the folks that want to put in the time and the work.
I just wanted to add to what Jason said. I'm in 100% agreement that the relationships are really the key component. Having served as a STRIVE mentor and seeing what the difference it makes in the students in school, that the incentives are nice, but it's the relationship and having that consistent person in their life that cares and is checking and helping and supporting them that really makes the difference.
So, Dan, this is awesome to learn about. At least from my perspective, I haven't been in this role for very long, so it helps to have the details, and those incentives are really generous and I'm sure very helpful with getting student participation. We did have a question in the chat about whether or not it's possible or whether you've discussed expanding to other school districts in Mason County.
Yeah, good question. So we're going to spend the summer looking at other options. We were provided a generous donation from the House of Flavors Foundation, and so that gives some seed money to consider. We've we've been asked by G2S and Mason County Eastern to consider. We've also had discussion about going younger before the senior year, trying to help kids before they get all the way, developing the, those practices all the way into their senior year. And really more discussion right now, more discussion with the schools as well as the club. So yeah, I think there is some interest. We have to make sure that we've got mentors and funding to do it. So at this point, we're a little bit ways from, expanding the program beyond where it's at right now. But I think, yeah, there's interest in being able to make this work elsewhere.
And so that was a follow-up question that I had was, what are your limitations? So I've heard mentors like human limitation. You have to have the people to connect, to build those relationships, and who have the time to build those relationships, obviously. And then it sounds like funding.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and the third that, we really have been lucky enough not to worry about, because we know all of the people that are mentors pretty well. As you can all appreciate, the thing that would sink a program like this immediately would have a mentor that is not appropriate. And so that's our biggest fear is as we expand, to be able to to properly vet the folks. So that's something we'd have to work on as well. But so vetting mentors, getting the funding, and getting enough mentors. Yeah. So I think those are the limiting pieces, and probably the third would be all people need to do is talk to Steve Forsberg at Ludington High School to understand the commitment on the school side. So it's, as much as it is with the mentors, there's a big time commitment on their end as well. So the school's got to be very, very much supportive of, in time and commitment. So.
thank you. I just want to give another few seconds to anyone else who has questions. Dan, I'm going to send you a big long email after this. So I'm excited to hear this information.
Okay.
Yeah, Jody, I have the question. This is Vic. Dan, I'm curious, do you start the year knowing that you might have 15 students and now you have to find 15 mentors, or do you start the school year or beginning of the process with knowing you have 15 mentors and you got to find 15 students? Is there something like it's a chicken or the egg thing that happens in this situation?
Well, in normal years, which in the last year and a half, we've not had anything anywhere near normal. We meet with the juniors at the end of the school year that would qualify for the program and give them an invitation. And then we have discussions with them prior to the school year starting to gauge interest. But yeah, there's a bit of scrambling in August, September to make sure that we've got enough mentors because we don't know how many students, we know how many would qualify. We don't know how many are willing to participate because they have to volunteer. So, so we, 1 year we could have 8 that sign up, and the next year we could have 15. So there's a bit of scrambling in that. We send the information out at the end and actually physically meet with the students at the end of the school year of their junior year. But, you got to think about the fact you got 17, 18-year-olds. A lot happens between then and come the start of the school year. So it is a bit of a crapshoot to try to figure out what you're starting out with. So,
Okay,
but I have a core, like this year I had 18 folks that agreed to be mentors. I needed 10.
okay.
And so in that case, I went first with Rotarians and, but that's, mentors is the biggest challenge just because of the way the program runs. And so we don't kick off until generally about the third week of September, because we've got the numbers, we've met. I and Steve Forsberg meet with the students, get them to sign up, and then I go about getting mentors in place, the final number, and we assign mentors with the students that would be the best fit, and then we have a meeting for the mentors to meet with the students. So
So you don't have to be a Rotarian to be a mentor then, correct?
we don't, but obviously we've got a Patty Cleavorn also assists me with a program, and between Patty, Steve, and I, we've got to know those people pretty well if they're not Rotarians. Again.
Sure, I understand.
But no, you do not need to be a Rotarian. I would say of the 15 I started out, or 18 I started out with, I had 10 Rotarians and 8 non-Rotarians.
Well, thank you so much. And if anybody has questions for Dan afterwards, you can shoot them to me, or if you have Dan's email, obviously shoot them to him. But I'll be happy to serve as the connector there, because it sounds like a wonderful program, and it's kind of got my brain worrying a bit. So I'm so happy you can be here, or you could be here this morning with us, Dan. Thank you very much. And thank you to Rotary for the work that you all are doing. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Well, thank
Thank
you.
you, Dan.
Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Dan.
Dan.
Thanks. Talk to you later.
All right, Jody. So next up, the introduction of Darby Johnson, West Shore Community College Dean of Arts and Sciences.
So I asked Darby to be here because she serves such an important role on campus. And so I just wanted you all to see her face. And one of the questions that came up at our previous Student Success Committee meeting, and I'm just giving this to you mainly, Darby, so you have this information, but was how can we connect more with faculty who are educating our scholars on West Shore's campus? So Darby's brand new to the role, but Darby, if you would be willing to just share a little bit of your background and kind of what you're doing and what you're excited about at West Shore, I think everyone in the room would love to meet you.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here this morning. So I'm Darby Johnson. I'm new to Ludington. I moved here from Chicago in February, and I absolutely adore it. And I can't wait until it's actually warmer and COVID restrictions lift even further so I can get the full experience. I've worked for over 20 years in higher education, the totality of it in community colleges. It was a choice from the beginning. I believe very strongly in the mission of the community college, and I've really dedicated myself to it. So I started out as English and humanities faculty, and did that for a bit and got kind of voluntold, pushed, forced into administration, but I've never looked back, and I've enjoyed the work that I've done, primarily focused on first-year student success initiatives for most of my career. So at Oklahoma City Community College, I was the director of academic student success, and I was on the core team for Achieving the Dream. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that organization, but it's to promote community college completion as well as Complete College America. So overseeing first-year initiatives to make sure the students who come in our door have the resources and support they need to be successful while they're there. And then from there, my husband's family is from this area of the country. I got offered a job in Chicago that pulled us a little closer. I served as the Dean of Instruction at Kennedy King College, which is one of the city colleges of Chicago, in one of the most impoverished neighborhoods, not just in Chicago, but honestly in the United States, where 98% of the students were on aid, having a whole variety of needs. So I'm very used to working in that kind of a context. So I'm excited to be here, as I said. As Dan was talking about earlier, I think those relationship pieces are key. And so that's probably where my biggest focus is making sure that we have the relationships in place to make sure that the students that come from Mason County, we're so lucky to have Amy, who is a master at this, right? But she and I are working very carefully right now, looking at how are we going to support these students as they come in from a very strange year, right? This is not a typical year. There are enough pressures for students coming in to college, but we know they may be even more enhanced. So what types of supports and relationships and processes can we use to bolster these students and help them out? So I'm very excited to work with your group in whatever capacity you think is appropriate. I want to make sure that we have at West Shore the supports and people in place and the connections for these students so that they know that it's a warm handoff from you to us, and that I am available and always available for students to come and talk to me if they need guidance, mentorship, etc. And we're also taking a look at our first year seminar class to really update that and make it current with what students today are needing. It's a big passion area. I'll try not to get too excited, but I really feel like there's great value in that class when it's taught in a way that bolsters students and gives them access to the resources, but also teaches them how to advocate for themselves and become agents for their own success, self-directed in their learning, and how they would go about doing that. So anything else you'd like to know? I feel like I just spit out a bunch of information.
I mean, you're saying,
Darby, this is Jim McLean. I just wanted to let you know that this committee is 100% behind you being totally successful with all of our first year Promise students. So
thank you so much. And again, please feel free to reach out to me to share information, to let me know things that are going on. I am more than happy. I think the Promise Zones are fantastic. It's not something that was available to students elsewhere where I've been. It's just the level of support, both financial and otherwise, is just, frankly, it's unbelievable how much support is available. So making sure as many students as possible access it is key.
well, Darby, you are singing my song. I was like, okay, well, we'll just let you run the meeting because you're saying all the things that we want. So we've got a completion coach on campus. And obviously, I think everyone in this room feels like we want to support our scholars 100%. We want to see them all complete or at least get to their career goals, whatever they might be. So and I'm sure that you know that our Promise Zone has sponsored first year seminar. And so I'm so appreciative that you're analyzing it, making sure that it's the most effective. And it sounds like I've talked to Annie Jacobson a little bit about this, but you guys have some innovations in mind that sound very exciting. For the rest of the committee, I have asked Annie Jacobson to, whenever it's available, to give a report on first year seminar. Our pilot is ending, so we've been in it 2 years. Both of them have been COVID years, so we're expecting to give as much grace as possible, but also like seeing the results from last year, I was so pleasantly surprised and pleased with the outcomes of our first year seminar that's offered on high school campuses, that I'm really looking forward to seeing what's happened this year and what the innovations are. So if that information is available at our June meeting, we'll try to get that in there, but I've asked Annie to share that with our full board sometime this summer when it's available. So I'm looking forward to that information as well. But Darby, yeah, what you're doing is what we want to see happen. So we should definitely talk more about how our Promise Zones can work in cohort.
That'd be great, Jody.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else have any questions for this?
I do hope that the Promise board can continue to support that, because the first year seminar is huge for these students. I see success stories all the time, and we really appreciate everything that West Shore does to put this together for the students, and the Promise board to help pay for it. It's big. It's big for all of our schools. We appreciate everything you do.
Well, and I just like to say too, from a West Shore perspective, we couldn't be more excited to have Darby on board, and particularly myself with all of the experience that Darby brings with student success and first year experience programs. Really excited to have her as part of this process and the work that we're starting over the summer, and that will continue over the course of the next, definitely the next year, and I'm sure into the foreseeable future. Since things are always changing, we're always adapting, we're always learning and responding to what our students need. So very, very excited to have Darby, and also I'm happy. I'm really excited to be able to share with you all of the things that we're looking at as far as first year seminar. As much as I'm able in June, I'm still currently teaching a section of first year seminar right now that goes through the end of next week when the seniors at Leadington High School will finish up. And it's been a really exciting trimester there. And so, yeah, I will happily share as much information as I possibly can come June.
We meet in July too, Annie, so no pressure. I don't want to make anybody's life more stressful right now. That's not what I want you to remember me for. Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Darby, for sharing about your background. Very exciting to have you here.
Thank you both, Darby and Annie.
And I'm just going to briefly share information about our 2021 senior survey. And I'm trying to get this to expand, and I always got to move. So we just started doing a senior survey for the Promise last year, and I sent it out to all of our applicants, and our counselors were willing to send it out to all of their students as well. So we did get a similar response rate to last year. I think when I initially sent out the information, we had 9 respondents, but we've got 37 now. Last year we had 47, so just a few fewer. The majority of whom attend Leadington High School, but you can see MCC and MCE had great response rates as well. Something that I heard, and so this is just a little bit of information for you, and I don't think this will be a surprise to anyone who's working in education right now, that our students are really surveyed out. And so just understand that it's my intention to make sure that in giving this in the future, if there are other surveys with which this can be shared, partnered, collaborated in the schools, so we don't have to over survey our students. I'll try to extrapolate that information from those existing surveys, or kind of get our surveys paired up with local schools, because I don't want to stress out our seniors, and we know that more screen time is not necessarily beneficial right now. So, but we did have, I feel like we had a decent response rate. And right now, of those responses, 67, so almost 70% of our students are planning to go out to West Shore and use the Promise. And then going to other areas as well, Michigan Trade School, College or University, or outside of Michigan are the next ones up. So, and this is the big one, and this is why I have surveyed last year, just to see, what are the primary concerns. And as you can see, even with the Promise, students still have concerns about going to college and paying for their college experience. And so that's something that I'm hoping that as a Promise zone, we can be mindful of and think about in terms of, what can we do to help students understand budgeting for college in advance, and maybe do some more interactive education for paying for college and really understanding the college scholarship through the Promise zone to help them move forward, so that they can go to school with confidence that, hey, if you're using the Promise and you're getting that 2.0, you are cared for, and we are going to make sure that you have that support that you need to get through the first year, so you can focus on the academic piece. So you can see that ranks up there too. So doing well in college, balancing work in college, and paying for books, that's come up again. Those are all concerns that students have. So the balancing work in college is very real, and I think a huge stressor for students. And almost every Promise scholar I've talked to is working along with going to school. So it's an important thing to help students. And we have a success coach on campus to do that, to help students kind of work out that balance and work out the schedule. And I email our scholars and let them know through success coaching, hey, if you want to do some one-on-ones where I kind of help you map out your 168 hours a week, I'm happy to do that. I had one student take me up on it this semester, so that's great. But that's also something that students, I believe, learn through first year seminar. So again, that partnership with West Shore is huge for this. I just wanted to share that with everybody. Okay.
Hey, Jody.
Yeah.
This is Vic. Could you go back to that graph quickly, the one about, I know that we talked about books before, and it's just interesting that books shows up as the third reason people are struggling. And I know that we talked before about Promise. I'm not sure if it's where that's at or what's happened with that, but it is interesting that that still continues to show up.
Yeah, and I can tell you exactly where it's at for me. I've had conversations with West Shore in terms of like, what would it look like for our 100+ scholars to do book, to sub to have a book program similar to ASM Tech, where ASM Tech takes care of all the book expenses for their students. And that exact program would be a little bit unwieldy. The other piece about books is obviously we'd have to rewrite our plan and get it approved by the state. But we do have some really creative thinkers on our board. Kathy Sturt is one of them. And she was in on that conversation about paying for books with me and West Shore and ASM Tech. And so we have some innovative ideas. We're thinking about maybe we're thinking about, how could we fund books creatively so that maybe we don't have to necessarily pay for it, or I don't mean pay for it, but necessarily rewrite the plan for it, but maybe we can do some supporting of that book expense through gift cards for participation in success coaching or orientation or something like that. So those are conversations that I've had with one of our board members. And so we're kind of just looking at like, what are our options? What are our budget? Of course, we're still in a very new promise zone. So knowing exactly what our funding looks like from year to year is just a tiny bit of a question mark because of COVID, but mostly I think it's just a matter of knowing for sure that the way we have it is the way we want it, and talking to the board and getting the board's approval on how we could go about funding books if that's a priority. So as the board figures out its priorities and its objectives, which they're in the process of doing right now, that conversation is going to come up again.
Jody, I was curious about how many high school seniors are there in Mason County?
Oh, and I can't remember the number right now, but it's around 300. And right now, in terms of our promise applicants, we've had 172 apply of that 300.
So 300, and then how many kids responded to the survey? Is it only the kids that are going to be Mason County Promise seniors, or going to using the Mason County Promise, or is this survey, was it all high school seniors?
The survey was sent out to all high school seniors at G2S. Well, I sent it to the people who could, our counselors at G2S, at MCE, at MCC, and ASM Tech. ASM Tech was, because of their different schedule, they didn't have the time to do the survey. LHS has a different senior survey that they're going to incorporate the questions into. So I didn't get their responses, but I also sent it out to our roster of Promise Scholar applicants. So yeah, it's a mix.
Yeah,
We
it
did
just
do
seems
that,
like
Jody, so I can give you our data.
Thank you, Laura.
Mhm.
it just seems like a low number of respondents. So it's great to have the data and the feedback, but you just wonder if if there were a few more kids, it might look different.
Oh yeah, it's not a big picture by any means. It's just over 10%. So, or just under 10%. So wait, no, just over. Sorry, it's Monday, right? But that's what I'm thinking. Like, if we can kind of incorporate this into existing surveys and just extrapolate the data from there, we'll probably get a better response rate. But
It's a great idea.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? Let me just check the chat here. Okay. All right. And then I stopped sharing, but our agenda is up there. Give me one more second. Okay. Just a few more notes here. A lot of seniors have been asking questions about when am I going to get information about the Promise Scholarship? So just so you all know, I know some of you work directly with seniors. The seniors once they apply, they get a confirmation. Then within that week, they'll get information from me about the next steps and what to expect, and that their notices will come out in mid-June. So just be assured that the students have received that information, but again, it's email. So email is limiting. I just held last week, and I think we had five participants Last week, I just held an info session for our 2021 seniors. I've got that recorded and it was sent out last week to all of our seniors who have applied to the promise. So they have that information and that'll be up on our website soon as well. It's on our YouTube channel. So there's access to it. If your seniors ever have any questions or you run into somebody who has questions about the promise zone, please let them know that I'm here for them and ready to answer those questions. And then our students who are scholars currently at West Shore are in the process of renewals. I think we've got 4 of them approved so far because their transcripts are available last Tuesday with grades. So I'll be in the process of approving those students and getting them set up for next year so they can use the promise. But we've had 50 renewal applications submitted so far. So that's exciting. Usually by this time, it's just kind of trickling in, but it seems like our students are really eager to use their promise again next year. And that is the extent of what I have to share. But if anybody has questions, I'm happy to take them. Okay.
So Jody, if we want to move into the Promise student supports and Mason Can connectivity grants.
Right. Oh, okay. So I lied. Not the extent of what I had to share. I thank you, Jason, for getting me on track on that agenda. So Mason Can, just as an FYI, I know that there are resources across the county and coming through across the nation for COVID support for connectivity, but locally we do have an established resource and we still have funding available for any high school students, their families, or West Shore Community College students who live in Mason County. For the high school students, they can also go to a Mason County high school but live somewhere else because this is Mason Can, not Promise Zone. So a little bit of difference there, but that funding, I think we have about $4 grand left in the pot to help pay for monthly internet bills, and that's available through August 21st. And the only obligation for families, they don't have to submit any financial information, but the only obligation is that they go through a community schools coordinator through United Way, or that they contact United Way to use those funds, and then they fill out a monthly evaluation on, and that just helps me to learn how much it helped them if they were able to have that internet paid for. So please know that's out there. If you hear of anybody struggling with connectivity, we have that funding available through the end of the summer.
Jody, can I just ask a quick question about how has this been communicated so far? Because we have a community schools coordinator on campus at West Shore, but this is the first I've heard of it. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, so information has been sent to our Promise scholars. I've got it through our social media, which obviously that's limited audience. I think we have 400 and some people who have followed us on Facebook or Insta. And then our high school counselors have been sharing that information as well. That was in papers. I could put in another one because I haven't put in an article recently. I think maybe January was the last time that I put in an article in the paper, but those are the primary audiences. But I did email our Promise scholars, and so it's out there, but again, it's, the best way to communicate with people right now is question mark. Right. And so if you have a way to share this information, I've got PDFs, I've got JPEGs ready to go. So
yeah, will you send me some PDFs? Because at the very least, I can specifically share it with my first year seminar students. Yes. And then, in student services, we could figure out a way to, see if there's another way that we can continue to push it with the West Shore community as well.
Yeah, I'd love to do that because I want that money spent. I do not want to send it back to Lansing.
And they do not have to be Promise scholars, right? They just need to be Mason County residents, because I'm wondering about other students who live in Mason County, like through Futures for Frontliners or Reconnect.
Yeah. For this program, they just have to be a West Shore student who lives in Mason County or a high school student who goes to a Mason County high school.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Jody. Mary is here. So Mary, welcome from Canary Consulting. And Jody, I don't know if you want to introduce Mary and the work around the Student Success Committee and defining our purpose and that feedback. So I'll turn it over to you, Jody and Mary.
Hey, Jason, one comment before that happens. Could we also invite Mary to provide some discussion to our group regarding Canary's recommendation for dividing up into 2 student success committees, please?
Sure. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jim, and so I just want to share really quickly that that's going to be something that once the board approves that, right, that still has to go to the board for review and approval and discussion. But once the board makes their decision on that, that's why we're having a June meeting, is so that we can discuss those things once they're concrete.
Well, I thought it would be good for the board's deliberation to have a recommendation from the group that it affects.
Yeah, and so that's the conundrum, right? That's a word I've been using a lot this week. But the perfect process we haven't worked out. So maybe I'll just Mary, throw that at you for some more pondering, because I don't know if we have the perfect process, but I do know that we want the board's input for sure and want some things solidified before we say, hey, this is a maybe, think about this maybe, and then we'll come back next week or next month with totally different ideas. But I know that is something that we considered and discussed, and Jim, I totally respect that. And I think that's also great thinking, and there's so much great thinking going around. I'm trying to filter it and do the right thing. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, we definitely, thanks, Jim. We will, that's what I was hoping to get a little bit of feedback on today, not specifically, all of those recommendations, because I want to make sure that those go to the board first. But that's the intention today, is to talk a little bit about the Student Success Committee's purpose and hear from this committee kind of what's going great and where they feel like they could be more helpful. And if we did look into the future and made some changes, what those might look like. So we will definitely be talking about that this morning. So I just want to give a little bit of background for those that haven't been involved for a long time. And I know that we've talked a little bit at this committee level, but I just want to reiterate sort of what Canarie's role has been here since November, with the board in particular, to help the Promise Zone sort of coordinate its direction moving forward and sort of get some good systems in place. So the work that Canary is doing is not meant to say, this is what you should be doing for success as with your product, but more so, how can we build a process and plans so that we can use the structure that we have or build the right structure to get the best results. So what we've been doing with the board is really trying to narrow the focus of the Mason County Promise Zone of the authority to be able to sort of name what those narrow the goals and objectives so that we can put some work toward that, accomplish those, and move on to new goals and objectives as we move forward. All in the name of student success, of course, and all in the name of building that college going culture and getting students to post-secondary work. So what we've done so far, what we're doing at the board level, is we worked at putting together some goals based on the Promise Zone's vision and values. And then we took some time to think about what success would look like if we were to hit those goals. And we, as a group, as the board, named some objectives, and we're in the process of finalizing those objectives. So we know the goals, we're working on finalizing the objectives. And the next step in that process is to look to our committees and determine, how do our committees help us meet those objectives and goals? So that is why we're asking Student Success to add a meeting so that we can sort of go back to the group and say, okay, these are the approved goals and objectives from the board. Here's where we see the Student Success Committee, and how can we kind of meet those objectives through the committees. Still empowering the committees to bring forward suggestions, recommendations to the board based on the knowledge that we have here and the skill set that we have here on the Student Success Committee, and let the board sort of determine, how do we allocate our resources to support those recommendations as we can. So one of the things that what the board has kind of done in the process in regard to Student Success Committee is to kind of give some feedback on what they felt like the purpose of the Student Success Committee is. As you all know, there isn't necessarily a formal Student Success Committee charter currently that says, these are the objectives, here's what we're trying to meet. You've had this overarching set of goals. You've tried to align with the Mason County Promise Zone Authority's sort of direction, but there hasn't been that specific, here's what we're here for kind of movement. So the board crafted, gave some feedback on how they saw the Student Success Committee. I'm hoping to open up the discussion today just to hear from you all what your response is to these charges or purpose that have been submitted by the board, and maybe either add what you feel like it also is, or just give some feedback on this. And I know these were submitted as part of the agenda, and you've probably seen a few of these things, and I'm just hopeful that I can get a little bit of discussion going here on these, on the feedback on this purpose specifically, and then we'll move into the conversation about the structure of the committee so far. So what's your, I would love to hear any feedback on this purpose that Jody has up on the screen here.
So I'll just read this to you really quickly. When the board gave feedback, they had a whole bunch of ideas, and I kind of just consolidated them into some general themes. So the first one is going to be obvious. You've been doing this for as long as you've existed as a Student Success Committee, to identify issues and take up items assigned by the board, to propose solutions to support students in using the promise, and make recommendations on those same assigned issues. So that's kind of the problem solving piece that I think we've done up until now, but it's really just clear that we want to be able to take what we're assigned and really have that that knowledge base and that experience base. And really, you guys are educational experts and are experts in the community that we serve, for identifying what will work or what you think will work best. Help define or review success measures for Promise Zone goals, objectives, and initiatives. And then the objectives piece is what we're working on now. And hopefully getting that approved this today at our board meeting. But that's going to be a piece where I think the Student Success Committee is really going to be key in making happen, and making more thoughtful recommendations based on those specific objectives. So it'll streamline, I think, in some ways, some of our work, or focus it. Thanks, Mary, for your help in that. And then to represent students, families, partners, and communities. And that's the huge piece, right? I mean, we have an 11 member board, but you all are out there working as boots on the ground every day. And so really bringing in that student voice piece and the school voice, the community voice, that's huge for us. And then the fifth one, to align with College Access Network partners to collaborate, reduce redundancy, and share resources. And I know a lot of you are on both College Access Network, serving in some capacity, and in the Promise Zone. So one of the board's ideas is that somehow we're going to piece that together in a thoughtful way that doesn't increase your work, but and decreases your time in meetings, and helps us to be just a little more strategic in the work that we do. So thank you for listening to me, and I'd love to hear your ideas, thoughts on this feedback.
Any thoughts from the committee?
I would say it looks great, Jason. I see, identify issues and look for solutions, and communication with the right people on behalf of the right ideas. Pretty easy to get behind from where I sit.
Jody,
I think it's broad enough that allows us to complete the work that we need to.
so each one of these objectives has some specificity to them once these 5 are adopted? Is that your thought, Jody?
Yeah, so and I'm sorry for taking that down, but it's just easier to see people's faces. So my thoughts, and of course it's not only me, this is the entire board working toward this, but yeah, that we're gonna be able to kind of look at these objectives, or look at our objectives from the Promise Zone, and then pair it up with, these are the responsibilities of the committee. So here's where our work lies. Here's what we want to do this year, next year, et cetera. and really start forming some concrete initiatives to address those overarching objectives and goals. Like, yeah, we know we have hope, we want more students to use the promise, but how are we actually going to do that? The Student Success Committee is going to be the brainchild for that. And in my mind, that's what I'm hoping anyway. And
Yeah, and just as an example there, you know, the senior seminar is such a great example, right? That's something that you've invested in, that the board has invested in. You're looking at it again. And so now is the time to kind of, for this committee to sort of, where I would see this committee's role based on what I'm reading from those, the purpose of the committee would be to say, okay, let's look at results from our investment previously. And what worked and what didn't, where would we, you know, if we want to recommend this to the board to fund again, what are those kind of deliverables that we're going to be looking for? Or just not to say, okay, you have to do this or you don't get our money, but how do we make sure that we're on the same page with those partners executing student seminar to say, okay, or senior seminar, you know, to say, this is what we're expecting. It was this rate of participation. I know one of the things the board was looking at is, you know, how many are completing it? How many are doing well in it? How many are, you know, so kind of agreeing on what those percentages are and having this committee, the board then would kind of charge this committee with saying, okay, let's take a look at the results from the previous investment. What's going to change or not change? You know, if it's going great and everybody's happy with the outcomes, then that's the recommendation from the committee again, right? And if it's not, sort of what do we do? And then have the committee come back and say, okay, we're recommending that we invest again. These are going to be the particular outcomes that we are charging that partner with if we're able to do this investment. And then that's how the board would vote. So that's sort of what that process would look like. That's a great example of kind of how you look at and invest in programs that support student success overall.
That's super helpful, Mary, that to kind of outline what that really looks like in a true example of something that's happening. Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything missing from that list? I know that's always such a hard question. What's missing? Is there anything missing that you see as a committee where you feel your role is there and it hasn't been outlined here? I mean, it's a pretty encompassing, so.
I don't know if it needs to be included in the actual objectives that are listed, but I just think proposed solutions, I think we also need to be looking at research. What is the research is there research behind, you know, ideas or proposals that we're discussing or putting forward?
I love that, actually, Andrea. I could see that being added as its own bullet even. I know you're saying maybe it doesn't, but some of this is really what the board is relying, I think, on this committee is to kind of find that, on the committee and on Jody, certainly, but to get that research. And you've already had some good examples this morning about, okay, but out of how many students or what, you know, how many is a percent? And that really is your job. And I don't see that necessarily bulleted here. So I could absolutely see that, you know, having the purpose be, you know, whether it's hard data or, you know, asking the right questions in terms of measurable. I could see that being added. What are other people's thoughts about adding some kind of component like that?
I think, this is Vic. I think Andrea thought about information. I know that the thing that haunts most administrators is a lack of data to make a decision sometimes. And so when you say, does this list include what you need? Sometimes it's a matter of getting feedback from the students to find out where they're failing, where they're being successful. So I think setting a goal that sets a higher percentage of returns from students, you know, would be important to gather that data so we can help reinforce those things that are successful and to eliminate those things that aren't working. So I think more data is important.
I would support that as well from the perspective of, as an educational institution, we're charged with making decisions that are based upon research and research best practice. And I think having the committee work through that process of defining what those, not only the success measures are, but the solutions and the programs that we recommend to the board for support, being able to do so, coming at it from a research focused lens, I think makes sense. So I'd support that.
Any other thoughts about anything that's missing or to support anything else that is here listed? Okay. So the next piece, you know, at this point, which Jim was talking about, what we did at Canary was kind of look at what your committee structure, what the overall committee structure is, taking into account the objectives that the board has kind of landed on, goals and objectives, and sort of determine what are the right next moves for the committee structure to make this happen. And one of the things that was really kind of screaming at me as I was looking at it and kind of assigning objectives to committees is that this committee in particular had a pretty lofty set of things it needed to do. And one of the exercises you all participated in already is kind of looking at that overall framework for students from getting to college through college. And you could see how many steps are there, how many programs are there already. That's just what's there right now, not even the things that need to get added to fill in the gaps. And so the recommendation that Canary is making is to say, can we, should we, split up student success into categories. And the two categories that I think make the most sense and would love to get your feedback on are a to college and through college student success committee. So kind of splitting it up and then not necessarily just saying this committee splits in half or anything, but we would really thoughtfully look at who needs to be on the committee in the to college arena and who needs to be on the committee in the through college arena. And then being able to match the skill sets of the volunteers to do the work in each of those spaces. So that is just a recommendation at this point. It's something I'm looking from the outside in saying, I think this would be really helpful and I think it would help achieve those goals. But I would love to hear your feedback, and then what we'll do is share what your feedback is as part of the board discussion this afternoon. None of this is getting decided today, so I don't want you to feel like if you don't jump in today, it's off the table. As Jody mentioned, that's why we added a meeting here for Student Success Committee, because we really want to make sure that we've got everybody poised for success, committee success, as well as student success. So this is kind of meant to begin the conversation and be thinking about the right way to move. But again, this is really just your first opportunity to give feedback on it and thoughts. We'll share that this afternoon at the board meeting. And then next month when we get together, we'll talk about it again. So thoughts about splitting this committee.
The only thing that comes to my mind as a potential drawback is that so many people who work with getting students through college, or I'm sorry, to college, are already connecting in other environments. And those of us who are doing a lot of work to get students through college are also connecting in other environments on different committees and different teams. And so having everyone together, it was nice to be able to make that connection, right? To bridge that, you know, from high school to college. And so, I mean, as long as there is still a way to bring that connection together, that's where I see such value in, excuse me, in having everybody here together. That doesn't mean there aren't other ways to do it, but that's, I do see a lot of value in that.
Yeah,
just to piggyback on that, actually, that's exactly what was occurring to me as you were speaking, is that that's sort of how we operate now. You know, when I meet with Joan and with the other counselors from the area, we are working on and concentrating on that to college. And it is so helpful to be in the room with Annie and others who are building resources for student success, because what you want is a continuum. And so what I really appreciate is being able to keep a pulse on and to also build, you know, for example, case in point, the Family Link now being expanded to the resources that are offered to West Shore students, so that you now have that same continuum of care, is very valuable. And I think that happens because you get in the room with individuals from other organizations at the other side, and then you end up finding ways to build programmings or to model them after, so that it's not as jarring, even from the student experience, that they know what supports are available to them at every level.
Mhm.
So it's strange because I'm thinking, well, that's actually not, we actually already operate this way. Like we actually have that with our counselor action committee, for example, that already exists. And maybe I'm not sure if that's what we're headed towards, but I don't know if there's necessarily an advantage to splitting us up further.
Okay. Other
Well,
thoughts?
what was the basis or the foundation for thinking it needed to be split up? Could somebody summarize that in like an elevator 30-second speech?
Yeah, I can try. Yes, the thought is because, so just as an example, just as an overview, there are two main goals that the board is looking at, and each of those goals has two objectives. And so the job of the committees would be to go, okay, what are some of the strategies that we're recommending to meet those objectives? So when you look at all of that work, you're looking at 4 objectives and then a group that's going to sit down and say, what are the strategies, not just strategies that should happen, but strategies that the promise zone should invest in further, right? So spending the dollars that the promise zone has. So as you think about that work, kind of looking at everything, okay, where should the promise zone's dollars go? Not necessarily what programs are effective or not effective, but what needs that injection of resources. So that felt like that's a lot, you know, and if you're all volunteers, you know, you're all spending your time. And so feeling like there's going to have to be some subgroups or discussion, and how can we do that efficiently? I love what you're saying, Annie, about, you know, how do we make sure that there's still good cohesion, even if we did split up the work of it? And that's what the whole thing is, right? The board isn't taking on all of this work because it's a lot. So we use our committees to kind of do some of the background and bring some things to the board that they can vet. So some of it was just sheer workload in terms of gathering the data for a specific, what's the right recommendation? So it felt like, how can we accomplish that in a, I don't want to, efficient way, I should say. And some of it's just about sheer work that's needed from the volunteers. Does that help?
Yep.
Oh, and I think this lends to the next item of business, which is a discussion about the locus of control, because really that's how do we focus the work we're doing within our realms of agency? Like if we have agency to affect something, then we want the people who have that agency working on the specific objectives or working on the specific initiatives to support that so that we can actually make it happen. So it's not just an idea on paper or in our heads, but we're actually doing the work, or we're identifying the people who can do the work or the students who need the support or whatever. And so that idea of to college and through college is separating the student success committee into those realms of control. And obviously there is some overlap. Like when I'm looking through the people in this room, I'm like, okay, well, you live in the business world, so you're everybody. Like we want you in high school, you know, in the high school setting, we want you to have internships for our scholars. We want these things to happen. So I'm, yeah, as I'm thinking this through, I'm kind of like, well, I don't know exactly that there'd be a perfect separation between those two realms, and that the locus of control would be more like, here's a nice Venn diagram, and here's how we overlap in the center, where we're all affecting our to college and through college population. But I guess I want to say is, like, if you think about your role in the community or your role in the workplace, where does most of your agency lie? And that's probably how we would separate it. It's just, you know, your own perception of where you can do the most good, where you can do the most work, where you can help affect change. Does that make sense? Like if I asked you that question today, where can you most affect change in which population, whether it's to college or through college, could you identify that? Some of you are going to be both, some of you are going to be, I don't know,
Well,
one or the other.
From my perspective, it seems logical to have a approach where one group focuses on getting kids to school, and then the other group would focus on, because there's no doubt once you cross that bridge and you're on the other side and you're now in school, many of your circumstances change. So I do think that there is a positive element to getting a group that would work on to school and a group that would work on keeping kids in school. I think there's merit to that just on the surface.
So
Thanks.
Jody and Mary, I wonder if when you talk about the locus of control and how decisions are made and recommendations are made, from the board's perspective, I wonder if it makes sense that the kind of the body that makes the recommendations to the board is the Student Success Committee. And both of these subcommittees, if you will, within the Student Success Committee make up the Student Success Committee and ultimately make recommendations. But you have two subcommittees within the Student Success Committee who operate on to college and through college, and that maybe on a quarterly basis, those groups come together and discuss the work that's being done. And when recommendations need to be made to the board, it's coming from one Student Success Committee as opposed to multiple committees. I'm just wondering if it makes sense that you still have an overarching Student Success Committee, but within that committee, there are two subcommittees who really are doing that work, digging into the research, understanding what the best practice with regards to getting students to college and getting students through college. They're doing that work and all the heavy lifting in the areas that their expertise lies in. But as the board operates under one Student Success Committee, who maybe it's a quarterly basis or biannual basis, that those subcommittees come together and make recommendations to the full board. I'm wondering if that makes some sense.
To me, it absolutely makes sense. So I'm just going to throw something out there too that has been kind of in the behind the scenes discussion. But in terms of Mason College Access Network, a lot of this work and a lot of the ideas that the Promise Zone is putting forward as objectives in some way ties into the work that the College Access Network is doing and the structure of the College Access Network. But no, and both the Promise Zone and the College Access Network are kind of reformulating to determine how do we best operate, how do we operate in cohort, and how do we operate in a way that really streamlines this work so we're not duplicating our efforts. But I think the big piece here, and Jason, what I'm hearing you say, is having this larger community of people come together at least once every so often to really look at, here's the data, here's the information, here are the things that are affecting our scholars, and what do we want to work on to solve that, and kind of put that forth and break it down then into the smaller groups, whether it be action teams or a subcommittee of student success. Like having those boots on the ground are what we want, but we don't want to miss this kind of community partnership of a bigger representation of our students and the work and our families and the needs that everybody in Mason County is facing. We don't want to miss out on that.
Yeah, I think
it's a long way of restating it, but does
yeah,
that
I think so. I think in looking for a solution that figures out how do we take those that have an expertise in getting students to college and through college, but yet still wanting to have that cohesive, comprehensive model that flows from, preschool and kindergarten all the way through the end of community college success. I think that that's a way that can make some sense, that you still come together on a regular, although not monthly type of basis to have those conversations, but yet you still have the action team to focus on the work that needs to get done. And it's not the whole committee doing the work, it's where does your expertise lie in one of those areas. Seems to make sense to me.
Yeah. And it doesn't, it maintains that collective action piece, right? Like you're all in this together, working together. You all have different areas of expertise that you're bringing to the table as a larger student success committee.
And it may be next month when we finalize those goals and objectives. You don't see them here today because we really need the board to finalize those and approve them first. But it might be as we bring those forward ahead of time, ahead of next month's meeting, there may be another way to split the work that starts to look sense to you all when you see those objectives. I felt like when I looked at it, that was the split. And I love what you're saying, Jason, about, you know, can we subcommittee it versus separate the committees? And Annie and Laura, thanks for your input there as well. And that you'll still have that opportunity to sort of say, okay, here's what we think makes some sense based on this work. Because I think by and large, overall, this committee has the lion's share of the work in the objectives in some ways. And so I just want to make sure that we're valuing everybody's time and making sure that we've got a setup that people can feel good about and that can yield the results we want to yield. So I appreciate that input. Any other thoughts about that split or what that might look like? Things that you want the board to be thinking about as they're talking about it this afternoon.
I just want to,
Go ahead, Vic, go.
well, I was just going to say, I really value the way the conversation has been going the last 5 minutes and 10. And I think the subcommittee idea, because the nature of the definition of the committee, the success committee puts a lot of pressure on that. I mean, it doesn't say the failure committee. It doesn't say the average committee. It says the success committee. So frankly, there is a lot of responsibility that associates with that, and getting people to college is part of the success, but getting them through college, frankly, I think is probably the greater aspect, because I think as kids get older, there's more influences, there's more exterior environmental things that come into play. So I think maybe dividing the group up into two, but keeping them cohesive, I think is a great idea. I really do.
Appreciate that. Okay. So at the next meeting in June, and you'll see ahead of time the goals and objectives that get approved by the board. And then what we'll do is sort of craft a sketch of what this could look like based on your feedback. It'll be based on the feedback we get from the board, but it'll just be a starting point for you in terms of what that end charter could look like. And kind of what we'll try to do is sort of finalize that and also share and talk a little bit about what is that process going to look like, because we're going to really then put some pressure on everybody to help with defining some strategies, identifying some strategies that we do want to bring forward for recommendation. This will be for the 2022 fiscal year for the promise zone. So we've got sort of a timeline we want to be sharing, but again, we want to work that through with the board and get their comfort level with it. We'll bring it to this committee and then we can craft the committee charter, get your feedback on some of the documents we put together. We'll be looking at both of those things in June. And that'll be a good time as well to sort of talk about the schedule. I know that we set that schedule all up, you know, at the beginning of the year. And I think I've said to Jody 10 times, can we change that? Can we move that? Can we move this meeting? So I do want to talk about, are we set up just structurally to do this work, even just how often we meet and how we're doing it? So I want to talk about that as well next month. So
and you were not the first person to say,
right?
Hey, do we need an 8 a.m. meeting on a Monday?
Right? It's tough, but I'm always amazed at the output from this committee at 8 a.m. on Mondays. So I do feel like it is your magic time for good feedback.
Brilliance happens at 8 a.m. on a Monday in this committee. It's pretty great.
Right.
Okay. I'm going to bring up the agenda here.
But
well, thank you, Mary. Thank you for all your thought and work on this. And thank you to the committee for being just gracious and thoughtful this morning. It's been great to hear your input, and I think it gives me a lot of food for thought too.
Jason?
Yes, Jim.
It's not on the agenda, but I would like to extend a huge thank you and to Jason Jeffries for his coordination of the special needs millage that passed this past week.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Jeffrey.
Yeah, wow, Jim, that's a nice compliment, particularly since there are a ton of people that are in this room that had a whole lot to do with that success. So thanks for mentioning it, but I would certainly put that right back out and thank Jason and Vic and so many others that are on this call for helping us with that. Now we just need to deliver, right? That's
Amen.
Thank you, Jim. Jody, any other business? Just simply seeing the next meeting and adjournment. So wanting to keep us to the time that we said we would be. So anything else?
Hey, I just have one question, Jason, if you
Go
don't
ahead.
mind.
Go ahead.
And I'm not expecting an answer, but I'm just curious, this concept of dividing into two groups. In the back of my mind, I'm wondering, has there been much work done on what student objective is the most successful? Is it that student that is going on to like a 4-year education, or that student that might be looking at some kind of vocational training? And I'm not expecting an answer to that, but I'm wondering if in fact that is some of the information that we are gaining or could gain to see if do we have a greater success with those kids that definitely know, hey, I'm going to be a welder and I'm going to use my promise to do a vocational, or is it mostly for those students that are going on to 4-year schools and maybe some kind of bachelor's degree program? And I'm just wondering if there's been any work in that kind of a research or evaluation.
I don't know that I can answer that question, but I can answer it from the perspective of how I think that work gets done in the proposed setup of a student success committee that breaks down into 2 subcommittees. When you look at the work of this student success committee, I think it's easy for us to ask the question, truly, how do we have an impact? And does it feel like we're accomplishing a whole lot in the irregular number of meetings that we've had throughout the course of the year? And I think the answer to that is probably a no. But if you break it down and you then, rather than just having a large group work on some of these questions, such as the one that you pose, but have action teams that have expertise in those areas, to be able to begin digging into the data, to begin digging into, and being able to answer those types of questions, and then bringing it back to the overall arching, larger student success committee is how I think we likely get the work done, as opposed to expecting that we as a large group are going to go out and tackle it and answer all of these questions and find the research and find the data. I just think that being able to break it down into some smaller action teams allows us maybe to go out and find the answers or find the data that supports those answers in a way that we've not been able to do. So I don't know that I have the answer to your question, other than to say, I think proposing this type of solution maybe puts us in a position to be able to answer that question for you.
As an example, I'm just quickly thinking of Kathy Surd and I meeting with West Shore to talk about books a little more in depth and brainstorming how can we address this issue. Maybe we can't solve the larger problem, but make it a permanent solution. But what are some creative ways that we can look at this issue of students not being able to afford their books and explore possible solutions and bring that back to the board or bring that back to the committee? That would be the kind of work that would happen in the through college piece, that we'd be looking like, how do we get our students through? Who are the 2 or 3 people on this subcommittee who can work on this and bring it back to us so that we can take action? And I think I haven't really had that agency as the director, and that's, in part on me, right? But like to call you up and say, hey Vic, how can we solve this problem? Or in the larger setting, like how can we really break down the issues that we're facing so that we can take action at them? It's just, this group is wonderful and thoughtful and a little bit unwieldy in terms of size. And so it just, I think, helps us to have more agency. That's my word of the morning that I stole from Darcy. Using that this morning because I'm like, that's exactly what we're looking at. How can we affect change?
Thank you.
Good question, Vic. Thank you. Any other thoughts before we adjourn the meeting? Jody, anything else? If not, we'll adjourn the meeting, time being 9:27.
Thank you. We're good.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
You.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.